The table was set. I had placed the cake in the center, its frosting smooth, a single candle waiting to be lit. Plates were stacked neatly, forks aligned, napkins folded with care. I sat in the chair closest to the window, watching the late afternoon light pour across the room, and I waited. I told myself they were running late, that traffic was bad, that maybe they had planned some kind of surprise and were deliberately stalling. My phone sat on the table beside me, screen up, silent. Every time it lit up, I reached for it, only to see another meaningless notification, a spam email, an app update, anything but what I wanted most. A happy birthday. The silence of the house grew heavier with every passing minute, and that's when the truth began to sink in. They weren't coming. Not my parents, not my siblings, not my friends. No one. On my birthday, they forgot me. It's strange, isn't it? How a single day can hold so much weight. Birthdays aren't just about cake or gifts. They're about being seen, being remembered, being acknowledged. They're about hearing someone say, "You matter." Because it was a big deal. It wasn't just about this birthday. It was about every moment that had led here. Every time my voice was ignored. Every time my efforts were overlooked. Every time I was made to feel like an afterthought in my own life. This birthday was just the evidence I could no longer deny. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Waiting for them to say I was enough, waiting for them to make me feel celebrated, but they never did, and maybe they never would. The hours dragged on, the candle stood unlit, the cake grew stale, and I sat in that silence, letting the truth carve itself into me. On my birthday they forgot me, but in that emptiness something unexpected began to stir. A whisper, a spark. If they forgot you, then remember yourself. Let me ask you, have you ever been forgotten on a day that mattered to you? A birthday, a graduation, an anniversary? Have you ever stared at empty chairs, waiting for people who never came? If you have, then you know the sting of invisibility, the ache of realizing you weren't worth remembering to the people who should have remembered most. That was my pain that night. But that night was also the beginning of something else. Because in their absence, I began to see the one person who had been there all along. Me. And that realization would change everything. The candle never burned. It stood there, stiff and unused, its wick untouched by fire. The cake, once hopeful in its perfection, sat untouched, its sweetness turning bitter with every passing hour. I stared at it until my eyes blurred, until the frosting became nothing more than shapes and shadows. This was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it was a reminder that I could be surrounded by people my whole life and still feel alone. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that birthdays are just another day, that people are busy, that schedules get messy, that maybe tomorrow someone would remember and laugh it off. "Oh, we're so sorry. How could we forget?" Every tick of the clock echoed like mockery. Midnight crept closer, and with it the undeniable truth. The day was gone. My birthday had passed, and no one remembered. Not one text, not one call, not one knock at the door. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important." And perhaps no one ever had. So I sat in that silence, the collapse inevitable, tears spilled, hot and uncontrollable, soaking into my hands as I buried my face. I cried for the birthday that wasn't, for the love I longed for the years of invisibility that weighed on me like chains. The sobs came in waves, anger, sorrow, shame, anger that they could forget, sorrow that I let it hurt me, shame that I still expected more. Hours passed. I wandered through the darkened house, the glow of streetlights slipping through the blinds. I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror, eyes swollen, cheeks streaked with tears, shoulders slumped. I barely recognized myself. And in that moment, I whispered aloud, Maybe they're right. Maybe I really don't matter. You start to wonder if you were ever worth remembering at all. The night grew colder. I crawled into bed, pulling the blanket over my head like a shield. But sleep didn't come. Instead, memories did. Other birthdays, other holidays, other moments where I was overlooked, the gift never given, the seat left empty, the promise forgotten. It wasn't just about this birthday. It was about every time they had shown me that my joy wasn't important to them. And suddenly the collapse wasn't just about the day. It was about a lifetime. Let me ask you, have you ever felt that kind of collapse? Where one event pulls back the curtain and forces you to see years of neglect, years of silence, years of being invisible. It's crushing, it steals your breath, it makes you want to disappear. That was me that night, but even as I lay there, swallowed by silence, something small flickered inside me. Not hope, not yet, but the tiniest spark of defiance. Because if they had forgotten me, maybe it was time I stopped forgetting myself. The morning after my forgotten birthday was heavy. The cake still sat on the table, untouched like a cruel reminder. The candle stood tall, waiting, but its wick was still bare. I walked past it with a knot in my stomach, part of me wanting to throw it all away, part of me unable to move. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat at the table, staring at the silent phone beside me. No notifications. No belated texts. Nothing. And then something shifted. I looked at that cake, at that candle, at that empty phone, and I thought, if they won't celebrate me, I will. It was such a simple thought, but it was also radical. Because for years, I had been waiting for their acknowledgement, waiting for their love, waiting for them to remember, and they never did. So why was I still waiting? I stood, walked to the table, and lit the candle. The tiny flame flickered in the still air, soft but alive. I stared at it, my eyes watering, and then, quietly, almost in a whisper, I sang, "Happy birthday to me." I wished for the strength to love myself enough that I would never feel this invisible again. And then I blew out the candle. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." It felt like planting a flag in the ground of my own soul and saying, "I'm here, I exist, and I matter." That night, I cut myself a slice of cake. I sat alone, eating it slowly, savoring not just the sweetness of sugar, but the sweetness of choice. For the first time, I wasn't eating to fill a void they had left, but to honor myself. And then I did something I had never done before. I bought myself a gift. I walked into a bookstore the next day and wandered through the aisles until I found it. A journal bound in leather, its pages blank, waiting. I bought it, wrapped it myself, and when I got home, I tore the paper open and smiled. Inside the first page, I wrote, "Have you ever lit your own candle, sung your own song, written your own card? If you have, then you know the power of it. Because it isn't about the gift. It's about the message. I see me. I celebrate me. I will not wait for others to tell me I matter." That was the spark of self-love. It didn't erase the pain. It didn't undo the years of being forgotten. But it gave me something they never had. Something they never could. Recognition. And from that spark, a fire would grow. Because once you begin to celebrate yourself, you never go back to waiting for others to do it. The journal sat on my nightstand, its leather cover warm beneath my hands each evening as I opened it. At first, I only wrote small things. "Today I made it through work," or "I cooked myself dinner." Simple acknowledgements, nothing extraordinary, but slowly the words began to change. "Today I smiled at myself in the mirror. Today I said no without feeling guilty. Today I felt proud." It was validation, it was the freedom to live fully as myself, and that's what I decided to give. The first big gift came in the form of independence. I started saving. At first, just small amounts, barely noticeable, But with time, the numbers grew. I budgeted, cut unnecessary expenses, and for the first time, I felt in control of my life. Months later, I signed the lease on my own apartment. Standing in that empty space, keys in hand, I cried. Because this wasn't just an apartment, it was proof. Proof that I could build a life for myself, even when no one else believed in me. That was a gift they never could have given. The second gift came in the form of dreams. I took a trip I had always wanted, but never dared to. Alone. I booked the ticket, packed my bag, and boarded the plane with fear and excitement swirling inside me. Walking through streets I had only seen in pictures, eating meals at cafes where no one knew my name, I felt free. More alive than I ever had, surrounded by people who forgot me. That trip was mine, a gift of courage, of adventure, of belonging everywhere I chose to stand. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not the invisible one, but the celebrated one, by me." The biggest gift of all, though, wasn't a place or a thing. It was self-respect. The day I realized I no longer needed their approval was the day I felt truly free. I stopped waiting for calls that never came. I stopped checking messages that stayed empty. I stopped organizing my life around the hope that someday they would remember. Instead, I built a life so full that their absence didn't define me anymore. Let me ask you, what is the greatest gift you've ever given yourself? Was it freedom? Was it courage? Was it peace? Whatever it was, you know this truth. Those gifts mean more than anything anyone else could ever give, because they're yours, because they last, and because no one can take them away. That's what I discovered after that forgotten birthday. They could forget me, they could overlook me, they could leave me sitting at a table with an unlit candle and a silent phone. But they could never stop me from giving myself what they never could: love, freedom, self-respect. And once I gave those things to myself, I was never the same again. Years passed, birthdays came and went, and with each one, the memory of that night, the unlit candle, the untouched cake, the silent phone, faded into something else. Not bitterness, not anger, but fuel. Because that night had given me the gift they never could, the realization that I didn't need them to remember me in order to celebrate myself. Now, when my birthday arrives, I have a ritual. I wake up early, I make coffee, and sit with my journal. The same one I bought after that forgotten birthday. Its pages are no longer filled with sorrow. They're filled with victories, memories, dreams, and gratitude. I flip to the first page where I wrote, "Happy birthday, from me to me. May this be the year I remember myself," and I smile, because I have kept that promise. I light a candle. Sometimes it's on a cake. Sometimes it's just a candle on my table. I close my eyes, take a deep breath, and make a wish. Not for their love, not for their approval, not for their memory. I wish for more courage to keep loving myself the way they never did. And then I blow it out, and the flame becomes mine. One year, I bought myself flowers. Another year, I booked a trip to a city I had always wanted to see. Another year, I hosted a dinner with friends who had become family, people who clapped, who laughed, who made me feel seen in ways my own blood never had. And each year, I realized more and more I had stopped being the forgotten one, because I had remembered myself. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Not because they remembered me, but because I finally remembered myself. Let me ask you, have you ever been forgotten by the people you thought would always remember? And did it hurt so deeply that you thought you might never recover? If you have, I want you to hear this. Their forgetting does not define you. Your remembering does. Because the greatest gift you can ever receive is the one you give yourself. The gift of self-love, self-respect, self-celebration. So yes, on my birthday they forgot me, but I lit the candle, I sang the song, I made the wish, I gave myself the gift they never could. And from that day on, I never forgot myself again. Tell me in the comments, what is the greatest gift you've ever given yourself? Subscribe if this story spoke to you, because here we transform heartbreak into healing and silence into self-celebration. Share this with someone who needs to hear. Being forgotten by others can be the beginning of remembering yourself. And I'll leave you with Jung's words one final time.